Hey guys, welcome to Through the Bible Verse by Verse, a plain and simple study of the entire Bible book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse. We are currently in Genesis chapter 29, and you could say it is another shift in the storyline. That is, Jacob has left home. He would be gone for 20 years. If you remember, he had deceived along with his mother, I should say, at his mother's behest. He deceived Isaac into giving him the birthright. In order to understand that, the birthright, or the right of the firstborn, usually was given to the firstborn heir, or male, not female. There are a few occasions, and we will see this moving forward, where the firstborn is given not to the firstborn male, but to whom God chooses. And in this case, it was Jacob. During Rebekah's pregnancy, they were wrestling in her belly, and she went to the Lord, and the Lord said, 2 nations are struggling within you. And then God made this prophetic command: the older will serve the younger. So Jacob had the first right, had he sought God, but he deceived along with his mother, which is also interesting since his mother had received that command from God. But anyway, they deceived, and Esau was bitter over this and vowed to kill Jacob. And so Rebekah really urges him to flee to his family and to his brother Laban. And so this is where we're going to pick up the story. Verse 1 says, Jacob resumed his journey. Now this is after also he had a dream. If you remember the dream with the famous Jacob's ladder, as people call it, but it's actually a stairway to heaven, a vision that he had, and angels ascending and descending upon it. A good friend of mine sent me a very interesting take on this too. We see this later on where Jesus tells, I believe it's Nathan, in the first chapter of John, that you will see angels ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. So this is a very interesting tie-in here to that, and I didn't see that before, but this, like I say, this dear brother has sent this to me. So he gets this vision, and God tells him that he's going to bring him back to this land. Now I say this because what we will see is, despite the clear revelation, the manifestation of God, the revelation, we're going to see the human nature come out as we have seen it. Fear, ignorance, and all kinds of sinfulness, okay? All right. So it said, Jacob resumed his journey and went to the eastern country. Now, I just a quick kind of note, we see the term eastern, heading east. I'm wondering, I'm not going to say this for sure, but if you look at where the nation of Israel is situated and then go east, all those nations to the east, that's what I'm assuming. But anyway, it's always east that you see kind of away from God's promise. And I think that's one of the most things right there. Anyway, verse 2, he looked and saw a well in the field. 3 flocks of sheep were lying there beside it, because the sheep were watered from this well. A large stone covered the opening of the well. When all the flocks were gathered there, the shepherds would roll the stone from the opening of the well and water the sheep. The stone then was placed back on the well opening. So that everybody kind of had this communal agreement. They would all bring their herds and then water their flocks from there, and then they would cover this big place. Now this stone was kind of large. Verse 12. Verse 4. Jacob asked the men at the well, "My brothers, where are you from?" "We are from Haran," they answered. "Do you know Laban's grandson of Nahor?" Jacob asked them. They answered, "We know him." "Is he well?" Jacob asked. "Yes," they said, "and here is his daughter Rachel coming with the sheep." Jacob said, "Look, it is still daylight. It is not time for the animal to be gathered. Water the flock, then go out and let them graze." But they replied, "We can't until all the flocks have been gathered and the stone is rolled from the well's opening. Then we will water the sheep." While he was still speaking with them, Rachel came near with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. Now this is kind of interesting. He makes this distinction. Shepherdess, men typically were shepherdess, but she was kind of a gal of the field. Verse 10, as soon as Jacob saw his uncle Laban's daughter Rachel with the sheep, he went up and rolled the stone from the opening of the water and watered his uncle Laban's sheep. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and wept loudly. He told Rachel that he was her father's relative, Rebekah's son. She ran and told her father. When Laban heard the news about his sister's son, Jacob, he ran to meet him, hugged him, and kissed him. Then he took him to his house, and Jacob told him all that had happened. Laban said, "Yes, you are my flesh and blood." After Jacob had stayed with him a month, Laban said to him, "Just because you are my relative, should you work for me for nothing? Tell me what your wages should be." We're going to get to know this family, kind of interesting. One of the questions you might be asking as well, what's up with the how close are relatives here? We are, one, keep this in mind, we have not yet gotten to the law, where the law would be probably a little more descriptive or definitive of how close a relative you can marry. And even still, we're going to see that cousins, they're in a sense, from what I can see, that there really was no there was no restrictions on cousins. At this time, before the law, there was no restrictions on who you could marry, sisters, whatever. But certainly cousins is not necessarily forbidden here. Verse 16, he says, "Now Laban had two daughters. The older was named Leah, and the younger was named Rachel. Leah had ordinary eyes, but Rachel was shapely and beautiful." Now, this is kind of kind here. Leah wasn't a good-looking gal, okay? She just wasn't a good-looking gal. And Rachel was beautiful. What's interesting about this is you're going to see, because sometimes the way the story is told, that Rachel is sort of the more, I want to say, preferred. One of the things we're going to see is Rachel wasn't the most godly person. We're going to see that play out. You're going to see how that plays out. She was a good-looking girl. She was a shepherdess. But Leah wasn't the most sought after, right? So when it said ordinary eyes, basically, I think that was being kind right there. Leah was, again, you could almost say Leah was unattractive. In other words, and we're going to see this. And one of the interesting things about Leah that we will see is that God will honor Leah, which is, here's the thing right here. If you don't fit in with the beauty standards, you do not have to fit in with the beauty standards. Just look to God and trust God. I know I don't think I fit in with the beauty standards, but I trust God. Okay. So verse 18, Jacob loved Rachel. Now remember, he loved her ever since he saw her. The first time he saw her, he fell in love with her. So it says, so Jacob loved Rachel. So he answered Laban, I will work 7 years for the younger daughter Rachel. Laban replied, better that I give her to you than to some other man. Stay with me. So Jacob worked 7 years for Rachel, and it seemed like only a few days to him because of his love for her. Then Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife, for my time is complete. I want to sleep with her. This is always kind of odd, but okay. One, long engagement, 7 years, right? And then he says to his father, give my wife so I can sleep with her. I don't know how to take that. I have 4 daughters, and I certainly would not have welcomed any of my sons-in-laws have said that to me. Okay, sign of the time. All right. Verse 20. So Laban invited all the men of the place to a feast. That evening, Laban took his daughter Leah and gave her to Jacob, and he slept with her. And Laban gave his slave Zilpah to his daughter Leah as her slave. And when morning came, there was Leah. So he said to Laban, what is this that you have done to me? Wasn't it Rachel that I work for you? Why have you deceived me? Laban answered, it is not custom in this place to give the younger daughter in marriage before the firstborn. Complete this week of wedding celebration, and we will also give you this younger one in return for working yet another 7 years for me. Now, you can't help but notice the irony of deception. And if you wanted to apply a reaping what you sow, if you remember 7 years previous, Jacob had deceived with his mother, their father, over the birthright. And here Jacob worked 7 years honestly and was deceived. This kind of lame excuse that Laban gave that it is not our custom. Well, he certainly didn't say that at the beginning, right? He didn't say when Jacob asked for Rachel, he didn't say, well, it's not our custom. The good news is he won't have to wait another 7 years. He said complete the wedding celebration. Now, in these days, weddings were about a week long, so 7 days. So basically, he had to kind of put up with Leah for 7 days, and then he was given Rachel, but he still had to work another 7 years, but at least he would work 7 years already married as opposed to waiting 7 years. Let's see, verse 29. And Laban gave his slave Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as her slave, and Jacob slept with Rachel also, and indeed he loved Rachel more than Leah. And he worked for Laban another 7 years. So we'll see that over the next 2 chapters. He loved Rachel. Now, what's kind of interesting about this, and it's not really due to anyone's fault. It's not due to anyone's fault. In other words, he loved. You can't have that. But so Leah is to me, the most victim here. And as I said, God will kind of vindicate her. Verse 31, when the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, he opened her womb, but Rachel was unable to conceive. And Leah conceived and gave birth to a son, and his name was Reuben, for she said, the Lord has seen my affliction. Surely my husband will love me now. And I think this becomes a statement here, kind of a sad statement, that basically all Leah wanted was to be loved. This is kind of sad. Is that she conceived again and gave birth to a son. The Lord and said, the Lord heard me, heard that I'm unloved, and has given me a son also. And she named his name, and she named him Simeon. She conceived again and gave birth to a son, and said, at last my husband will become attached to me, because I have borne three sons for him. Therefore he was named Levi. And she conceived again and gave birth to a son, and said, this time I will praise the Lord. Therefore she named him Judah. Then Leah stopped having children. Now, what we see here, and I think this is kind of interesting, that what we see, as I said, Leah, and I'm going to say poor Leah, because she certainly was treated unfairly. And basically, she just wanted to be loved. She wanted to be loved by her husband. She was thrown off. She was aware that she was thrown off. And throughout all of this, she just wants to be loved. Now, she will never receive that from Jacob, that kind of love that she wants. God, in spite of that, however, is honoring her. Now, remember, during these days, it was a shame, one, not to even be able to conceive, and then secondly, if you didn't have male. And God gave her right off 4 sons by Jacob. So that's kind of the first way he honors Leah. He's going to honor her, to me, in a lot more ways, but he kind of honors her. And so, like I say, she will never receive the love that she really wants from Jacob. Jacob, in a sense, will always treat her as you were just thrown off on me. Your father deceived me. She knows that. We're going to see even later on, again, how Leah is mistreated. But God will reward her, and I think in an eternal way. We'll see that later. All right, guys. Look, I'll see you in the next study. All right, see you next time.